Today's episode is brought to you by OpenFortune. OpenFortune flipped the fortune cookie on its head. In a world where every person sees about 4,000 to 6,000 ads a day, these ads actually break through the noise and are ads that people remember. And you can, as a brand, write any fortune. We also reach 99% of zip codes and are in 47,000 restaurants to date. So reaching consumers wherever they be. So thanks, OpenFortune, for renting out the studio and allowing us to talk to some amazing guests today. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to How the Fuck Did You Get That Job, where we spotlight the journey of industry trendsetters and where your ever-intrigued host dives in, eager to know more. Joining us today is the dynamic Lauren Scrima, an NYU alum with a background in politics and business. Lauren's career has been nothing short of diverse. She kicked things off at The New Yorker, followed by an artistic detour at the Boston Ballet. Her flair for marketing shone through as she rose through the ranks at Dr. Pepper, Snapple. A transformative 6-year tenure at AB InBev had her shaping iconic brands like Stella Artois, Bud Light, and Budweiser. And now she's leading the play as the VP of Marketing at NYCFC. So, Lauren, how the fuck did you get that job?
Well, this latest job, it was kind of a cold outreach, actually, on LinkedIn. So at the time, this was about a year ago, I was working at a health tech startup called the Pill Club, which has since gone out of business. And at that time, I could sort of see that things were not going in a good direction. So I put all my feelers out on LinkedIn and kind of told everyone I was open to something new. And NYCFC found me. They said they liked people that had, backgrounds like I did from ABI, and so I kind of went for it.
And good things come to those who wait. I will say I want to back up all the way to kind of, and we'll talk about NYCFC, obviously, but just like talk to me through, we're talking about right before this, like high schools, and but also like how you decided to go to NYU and what made that the right choice for you.
Sure. Well, so let's see. All the way back, I grew up outside of Boston, not too dissimilar to...
We're in?
Middleton. It's kind of near Peabody, Salem, that kind of area, north of Boston.
Yeah, my partner's from Andover.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's basically right next door.
Right there.
Richardson's Ice Cream is the thing that we're known for. Let's see. In NYU, my dad says that the reason I went was because I was obsessed with Friends and the idea of living in New York City, which I always kind of laughed at. But now in retrospect, I feel like it might be true.
What Friends character are you?
Probably Monica. I'm a little bit anal about cleaning, so I'm going to go for that.
There you go. Self-aware.
But yeah, at NYU, I think, first of all, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And NYU was a massive school with lots of different options, and it was in New York City. And I remember visiting New York City when I was maybe 16, and the magic sort of sank in, and I knew I had to be there. So it was a lot about the city, but then the school, of course, too, is amazing. So that was really it.
And how do you choose what to study? Because the reason I ask this is a lot of our listeners are, anywhere from like 17 to early mid-20s. So that's like the first big decision you make.
Yep. Yeah, so political science, that's what I studied the whole 4 years. At the time, so the year 2000 was when, Bush ran against Gore, and it was, a very sort of like contentious election. And my dad was a big politics buff, so we watched every debate, we watched all the SNL skits, and I really liked it. I remember AP US History was one of my favorite classes in high school, and so it seemed like a good place to start and kind of, learn the rest of that story. I remember being frustrated in high school because they only taught us up until World War II, and then the textbooks stopped. And I was like, but what about, the 1940s through now? Like, I need to learn that. And that was kind of my driver, then go study political science. I felt like I had to finish the book.
What do you take, because a lot of the people I interview who are, either tremendous marketers or tremendous in their business career often aren't studying, either entrepreneurship or business, right?
Yeah.
What did you take from that poli-sci education that you applied today?
Yeah, I think what really drove me toward it, and this is such a millennial thing, is I really saw an opportunity to make an impact, and I felt like I had to sort of find something where I could have like a big lasting impact on the world. And so I thought it was going to be politics. Then I ended up like really hating sort of all the career possibilities that came out of politics. But then when I finally stumbled upon marketing, I realized, well, actually, this is a lot more fun, and it's another way that you can impact a lot of people with a story or a message. but it's obviously in a very sort of different kind of vehicle. And so kind of discovered like the power of the private sector.
Yes, spoken like a true millennial, right?
True millennial,
I
yes.
feel the same way. So talk to me about landing that first gig at The New Yorker, right? It is, that was your first job out of college?
Yes, yeah. So, well, it's the first kind of real job I had out of college. I graduated early, and I did probably like a 4-month stint at the New York Public Library, actually. I was a development associate. It was so short, and I never put it on my resume, but really beautiful building. But it was probably the thing that really sealed the deal for me, that anything remotely related to politics, I just wasn't interested in.
What was that moment that you realized politics?
I just remember being so bored and having ideas that then would get sort of bogged down in lots of red tape.
Sure.
And it was so demotivating. Like, I wanted to go, and then I was at this place that just felt like it was moving at a, just sort of like dinosaur pace. Exactly. So anyway.
Well, we missed that on the research department, so I'll talk
No, I usually don't. It's so short. I don't talk about it a ton. But so the New Yorker, I quit that job out of frustration, and I was pretty lost at that time, actually, having had tried, I spoke with a lawyer who was an NYU alum and kind of asked about that, and he was like, only do it if you're really into it, and I knew I wasn't going to be into it, and so I didn't really know what to do. A good friend of mine at NYU had studied comms and media, and she was working at Condé Nast at Self Magazine. And so she said, hey, there's an open position at The New Yorker in the sales department. Do you want me to put your name in? And I said, sure, why not? Sure. And so I got the job. And so that was really it.
And what did you learn from, your experience there?
It was very Devil Wears Prada. Actually, the movie came out right after that, I think. I was sort of like the lowest person on the totem pole, literally getting coffee for my bosses. But that was where I discovered marketing. So I had a great boss, who would bring me into her sales pitch meetings. And I remember sitting across the table from brand marketers on the client side. So we had the liquor business, the auto business, HBO was one of the clients. And so speaking with really big brands and kind of hearing about, those brand managers and directors talk about how they were running their business and their strategy. And I just remember thinking, I need to be on that side of the table.
There you go. And it's funny, Devil's Wear Prada, I feel like is a good, first job. I have a picture I'll show you after the show, but it's with me as a 6-year-old with, or like an 8-year-old with Meryl Streep. And
wow.
Yeah, it's my my favorite photo. And I love her. But anyway, let's talk about the Boston Ballet too. So a hard pivot.
Yeah. So, I really loved The New Yorker. I learned a lot about sort of what it takes to survive in the working world. But the minute I had this epiphany about marketing, I knew like this being at that company was not the thing to sort of take me there. And so I started studying for the GMAT when I was at The New Yorker. I would come to the office at 7 a.m., take a practice test in their cafeteria, and then head upstairs and go to work. And right around that time, I was starting to get a little bit burned out with New York. I had been there about 6 years, including my undergrad experience, and decided to go home to Boston for a little bit, kind of reset during this period of time where I was studying for the GMAT and getting ready for business school. And so it was actually a pretty tough time because I was unemployed for probably about 6 months, just trying to figure out what to do between that moment and then going to business school. And I had always been a dancer. I still am. It's sort of my outside of work passion. I grew up doing ballet, but then as I got older, I did hip hop, jazz, all these other, cool. And I want to learn salsa, but I haven't quite figured it out.
My partner's a salsa and bachata dancer, and she's trying to teach me. But also, we just had Heidi Anderson on, who you should talk to, is the CMO of Nextdoor, and she's also a dancer.
Cool.
Or not? Sorry, I messed up. Not Heidi, Erin.
Okay.
CMO of Museum of Ice Cream.
Oh, yeah, cool. That's
great. Erin is a dancer as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I kind of figured, that let me sort of follow something that I know I have a lot of heart for in the meantime. And so I can't remember exactly who I contacted, but it was sort of a cold outreach to the Boston Ballet. I said, hey, is there any sort of position that I would, be qualified to do? I worked for free for them for probably, 3 or 4 months.
How do you feel about working for free?
Well, at the time I was living at home, so
okay.
it was possible, but it was a little bit like degrading, sure. I guess I would say. I remember feeling, just like mentally really, really bad, and it was tough. It was tough. There were some kind of dark days there about just not feeling valuable. And so, but I stuck with it. It was a great office with really smart people. and they gave me a full-time job. So I ended up taking a sales associate position there for a little shy of a year. And I would sort of do that during the day, and then at night I was kind of like applying to business school and kind of continuing that journey.
What's one thing people don't understand or realize about the ballet business?
There's a lot of salespeople in the ballet business. Like, you know, when you sort of look at it from the outside, it feels very sort of like artsy and creative. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's not unlike what I'm doing now. It's every single week you're trying to drive tickets and revenue. And I mean, that was pretty eye-opening, actually, to see that side of it.
Yeah, that's
having been a
that
dancer.
You don't really think about.
Yeah.
And they're not wearing ballet shoes. And
exactly. Yeah,
that's awesome.
There's some hustle there.
So talk to me about taking that transition to Dr. Pepper Snapple. Everybody knows those brand names from home. You know, what made it the right choice for you to kind of put the ballet shoes to the side?
Yeah, so I think, again, I knew that working at the ballet was always going to be a bit of a temporary thing, because I had this big goal of getting to business school, which I knew was then going to lead me into brand marketing, which was what I really wanted to do. So it wasn't too difficult, you know, in June or whenever it was, you know, once the acceptance letter started to come in for business school, and I knew I was going to go do that. I told them, you know, thanks, I'm moving on, and ended up going to UNC to get my MBA. And that's how I found Dr. Pepper Snapple. So they recruited on campus.
Would you recommend an MBA to people, you know, mid-20s, or in today's age, I guess?
I think it really depends. I think if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have said definitely yes. But it's expensive.
Yeah.
I ended up getting a pretty hefty scholarship, which helped a lot. But I don't think it's for everyone. And now
you did it on campus?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So I did the full-time program. Exactly. But it is not for everyone. For me, I think it made sense because I was kind of a career switcher. I didn't have sort of a robust marketing background. I had some sales experience, but that was really it. But for others that have just sort of been in marketing, really know their trade, whether it's social media or paid media or, you know, whatever it is, you probably don't need an MBA to be good at what you do.
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest thing? The reason I asked that question is, one, selfishly, but also two, like, I feel like it's a hot button topic these days, especially because less people are getting it, but there's still obviously some value in it.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest thing that you took away from that MBA? Was it the job at Dr. Pepper Snapple?
That was a big part of it for sure. But I mean, it sounds cliche, but the network of people.
True.
We had a class of a little shy of 300 people, and I still keep in touch with not most of them, but many of them. It's this insulated experience where you're sort of really close to people day in and day out. You know, we're living in the same sort of like apartment complexes and going to the same classes and traveling together. And so you really get to know this group of people. And that's come in handy later in life as well, not only just because it's a great group of people, but it's how I got some of my jobs later in life. And so I think that's probably the biggest value that I got out of it, in addition to, you know, sort of learning things that I never would have learned, like finance and operations and accounting. I had never taken any of those classes. But it really was the network of people. And, of course, the job was the exact type of job that I had been wanting to get.
And what was that? Was that brand marketing?
Brand marketing, yeah.
So what, you know, from the outside looking in, you don't really know, right? You see the brand in the bodega or whatever it is, like what's going on behind the scenes.
You mean in terms of what it takes to be, like what's involved in being a brand marketer?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what was really compelling to me is and this is kind of how it was pitched to me, and I think it's true, it's like running your own business. And I thought, well, that sounds great. Going back to the idea earlier of making an impact, I thought, well, cool. It's sort of like a way to inherit a business that I don't have to start myself. And that's really what it is. You know, you're kind of sitting at the center of a wheel with lots of different levers to pull, and it's up to you to figure out how to grow your brand depending on what the business challenges are. And I really liked that level of sort of like autonomy and decision making.
So do you think that it attracts more like entrepreneurial types?
I think so. Yeah.
So when you get brought in there, like what are the problems that you're looking to solve, or the pain points of Dr. Pepper Snapple?
Sure. So for those brands, I worked on a few. I started on Canada Dry. I was there for probably a year and a half. And that was my first real brand job. And so at the time in the carbonated soft drink business, which is, not going to be surprising, but most of the brands were in decline because of, health sort of growing in popularity in this country and around the world. Canada Dry was the only brand that was growing. And it was really because people had this perception of, it being a calming sort of beverage or aid, especially when you're flying on an airplane or if you're not feeling so good. And so there was this really interesting emotional connection to it, even though scientifically it wasn't any different than a Dr. Pepper or what have you. And so that was really what we started to hone in on, is how do you then continue to expand a brand like that, which is really so much based on emotion. And I think that's why I stuck with beverages for so long, because at the end of the day, there's not that much that really differentiates what you're drinking, but the emotions connected to those brands, that's really what kind of pulls them apart.
It is nuts. It's funny you say the ginger ale thing. My dad, he's a doc, and he wakes up at like 6 a.m. and we're talking him, and to do like operations, all that stuff. We're talking him and my partner. He goes, yeah, like as soon as I wake up, I down like 3 or 4 7-Ups. And I was like, what, Dad?
That's a lot.
I was like, that is so much 7-Up, especially as a doctor, like before 9 a.m. Like that's crazy. And we were looking around like, just like looking at each other. He's like, I don't know. And then I'm like, he goes, no, it's not 7-Up, it's ginger ale. Okay. And we go, oh, that's a lot better, even though realistically it's not at all. But so I will say kudos to you and the ginger ale.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I can take credit, but
whatever. But
still,
it is true, the power of brand with that. So talk to me. What are the biggest differences about alcoholic space versus going to AB and Bev versus something more soft drink related?
I don't, because I've only worked at those two companies, I can't speak as much to sort of like the cultures at other companies, but at least between the two companies, to me, it was night and day in terms of culture and sort of the mentality on how to grow the business. And that was why I made the move. So this is probably different now because now there's a different ownership structure. But at the time, Dr. Pepper Snapple Group, as it was known, was much more conservative. And so the mentality was carbonated soft drinks are the business. That's what we're going to focus on growing, even though there was a whole group of other brands that were smaller, like sparkling waters, for example, that were smaller in volume, but the growth was double digits. And I remember sitting in an all-hands meeting, and the CEO of the company said, carbonated soft drinks are in our blood. We are not going to pivot to sparkling water. And I just thought, oh God, like this is not the company that is going to be about progression. I need to get out of here. And AB InBev was the opposite. They're, if you know anything about them, like they're very bullish. They take big bets. They're always on the forefront of whatever new technology is out there. And I saw that, when that opportunity popped up, I said, okay, I need to try my luck at that place. That's more aligned with who I am.
That's cool that you kind of realized that curve and you're just like, it's time to go. How did that opportunity come about?
Another cold outreach, actually. So I was living in Texas at the time for Dr. Pepper Snapple. They had reached out to me kind of early on into my tenure at Dr. Pepper for a lateral role. And I said, it probably doesn't make sense. I don't know that I really want to go to St. Louis either, like not really sure what's there. And so I turned that down. And then a year later, they came back for a role that was a promotion. And so I remember at the time still thinking, I really don't want to move to St. Louis. I don't know. And my then fiance, now my husband at the time, said, like, just talk to them. It can't hurt to talk to them. I had always said I wanted to be in beer because I had sort of recognized this sort of amazing potential for emotional marketing, which just was so impactful and great. And the beer industry tends to do a lot of that. And so he said, just talk to them, and who knows, it can't hurt. And so I did. They flew me up there. I got to see sort of the whole, AB InBev campus. And I decided to go for it. I mean, a lot of it is big credit to my now husband, who was sort of willing to just come along for the ride and gave us that like geographical flexibility. But that's how it came up.
Very cool. And I've heard they do a lot of stuff with the alumni events of AB InBev, right?
I don't know. What do you mean?
We'll cut that.
Okay.
I'm wrong. I've had one of my buddies who works there, and he was like, "Oh, they do a lot of alumni connections." But anyway,
yeah, I don't know.
I want to talk too about just agency versus brand.
Yeah.
How do you work with agencies, and how do you sort out which one's right, and when do you know when to, work with them, and why haven't you gone agency side?
Yeah, good question. Well, to the first question, sort of like how to.
No,
that's all right. That's all right. How to work with them. So I used to work with them a lot more when I was at Dr. Pepper, Snapple, and then AB InBev. I don't work with them so much now, which I can talk about. But I think it really came down to sort of who was willing, who was sort of like the best in the business was where we always started when I was at ABI. But then not just that, sort of who was willing to really sort of be invested in the brand with us and sort of act as an extension of the brand team. And that's how we stumbled upon a couple of the agencies I worked with for a very long time. You kind of, have to find that perfect intersection of an agency that isn't too big so that they're not going to have enough time to spend with you. And so that for me was sort of like the most important thing. What was your second question? Why haven't I gone to the agency side? So, I think when I left ABI, which I can talk about later, I did a lot of soul searching on what I wanted to do next, and I did consider it. But I had heard, because I have a lot of colleagues over on the agency side, that it was, a lot more grueling, a lot of hours, a bit more thankless. And at the end of the day, you're sort of creating this amazing work that you then have to hand off to somebody else to own. And that just sounded terrible. I like the idea of sort of creating and building something and then, nurturing it and growing it and sending it out into the world. So I didn't want to sort of part with that that feeling.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And most people have either our agency and go brand, but it's interesting to hear your career path and staying brand focused. Talk to me about just going into NYCFC. And I remember going to a game and 3 years ago and thinking, this is cool. They have something here. What was that moment for you?
Yeah, so I think, I started in January, which was right before the season. The season kicks off at the end of February, and it's probably similar to what you're describing. Soccer wasn't entirely new to me. When I was at Budweiser on the global side, I worked on the World Cup campaign that we had in 2018. I had worked on sponsorships with Premier League and La Liga, so I kind of knew that world a little bit. And I had the privilege of going to the World Cup in Russia, and I remember that was one of the first moments for soccer in general where I just thought, oh my God, I had no idea this even existed.
Phenomenon.
Having grown up, exactly, in American sports with a very American football, baseball type of family. The fans are just entirely different. The rituals and the chants and the energy, they're on their feet the whole time. It was completely different. Probably the closest thing we have is the NBA, I would say. So that was kind of the moment for NYCFC as well, when we had our first home game. And I was, I still do this. I like as much as I can to sort of not be up in the suites and come down to where the fans are and watch the games with the fans to kind of get the full experience. And so I did that for that first game. And it was similar. It was incredible just to see the amount of people that were so passionate and dedicated to this sports team that, to be candid, I hadn't heard of until maybe a couple years earlier. And I just thought, wow, this is a really hidden gem that we have right here in New York City.
Yeah.
And that's now my job, is to sort of tell people about this hidden gem.
It's so cool. I remember also going and just being like, wait, I could be home by 10?
That too.
Because the game's just, you go to a Yankee game and
can be long.
Yeah, it can be long.
Yeah.
You could be tired at work the next day.
Yeah.
What were the pain points of NYCFC that when they hired you, they wanted you to reach?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest one was probably my role had been vacant for a little over half a year. And so I have an incredible team that I inherited there. But a lot of it was really just kind of bringing some strategy on top of the great work that was already being done. When I came in, there was a lot of really good initiatives that were kind of done in silos because, people just didn't have time to sort of get together and figure out how do we kind of bring this marketing strategy together in a cohesive way. So that was really the biggest thing that I came in and helped with right away, was just to sort of look at things from a higher level, bird's eye view, and say what are our top 2 or 3 biggest business challenges, and how does everything that we're doing map to those challenges? And are there things that we're doing that we shouldn't be spending time on because it's not really serving us? And are there things that we're not doing that we should be doing because it seems like the obvious sort of answer to our problems? And so that was really sort of the thing I think, hired for, and that I've been spending most of my time on.
What did Messi coming to the league, how did that impact you?
It was huge, which I'm sure everyone will say at every club. Yeah, I mean, it just put the MLS and soccer into the public sort of consciousness, which, I'm still pretty new to all of it, but my sense is that that hadn't really happened since maybe the days of Beckham.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, everyone in my network was reaching out.
There's less media dollars behind that.
Right, exactly.
Apple didn't have
They didn't have
board.
TikTok then, all these other channels. So everyone in my network was coming to me and saying, "Oh my, like what's going on with Messi? What's happening?" And
Sure.
it was on ESPN every day when he was playing in the Leagues Cup, and so. Anyway, I think it's had an impact on all of the clubs for sure. For us in particular, I mean, we saw just sort of a residual boost in, people being interested in memberships and tickets. And, right when that got announced, you could sort of look at the data and see how things were already, going to be impacted in a positive way.
So you talk about strategy and coming in. What was an example of something that you stopped doing, right, that wasn't serving the business, and an example of something that you started doing that started serving the business?
Sure. So, one of the things that I observed is we have a very amazing and passionate fan base. They're not as big as, say, the fan base of the Yankees or another sports team, but they're small but mighty. Very, very sort of loyal fan base. And so we don't have sort of as much of an issue as other brands I've worked on with retention. It's actually pretty good. And so I sort of looked at all the activities that we were doing that were really geared toward retention. For example, we had a fan fest almost every single home game this year. A fan fest is basically sort of like a big festival or
Sure.
event outside of the game. And so that's one of the things that we kind of looked at and said, well, maybe we should be looking at moving that to, somewhere right in the middle of the city where we could start to attract new fans.
Or like top of funnel.
Yeah, exactly. And start to kind of spread the word to people that don't know about us. And so that's one of the big things that, I've kind of observed right away that will be changing a little bit here going forward. And then the other thing was, what did you start? Was that the other question?
Start.
So I had done a lot of influencer marketing in my past roles. And of course, with the rise of TikTok, that's such a big part of the marketing mix now. And so none of that was being done at NYCFC. And with the biggest business challenge being that, people just don't know about the team. It's an awareness challenge. To me, that was kind of a no-brainer. Like, we've got to start figuring out what is the right sort of type of influencer, the right type of content, the right channel mix, the right cadence. And so we just started experimenting with that this year, and it's actually paid huge dividends. Every single month, the reach numbers are going up and up and up as we're sort of tweaking the creative formula.
That's so cool.
Yeah.